Hello and welcome to my Adobe Premiere crash course video. In this video I want to show you the very basics of video editing, and I'm going to show you the process that I take to edit a video. Now I am most certainly not an expert with Adobe Premiere, and my methods may not be the best way to do things, but I'm just going to show you how I edit a video, and you should be able to get a basic idea as to how to use Adobe Premiere by the end of this video. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started here. Now I actually did take a couple of classes in high school about how to use the Adobe suite and things like that, and one of the things that they mentioned was very important with Adobe Premiere specifically was to keep all your files organized. So every time I start a project I will create a new folder, and this is going to be, we're going to call this one 3D Printer Meltdown. And now that I have that folder, we're going to put every file that we use for this video into that folder. So this is all the footage on my SD card for that camera. We're gonna go ahead and copy that over into this folder so we can go ahead and use it for our video. While that copies, we're gonna go ahead and open up Premiere and we'll set up the project. Now that we're in here, we're gonna go ahead and click on New Project, and we're gonna give it a name. I'm gonna call it the same as what I called the folder. Doesn't really matter what you name it, it's all up to you. Now, as for the rest of these things, you're going to want to pick a location where you want to save it, so you can click on Browse. Now, I have a folder on my computer that I use just for the save files for Premiere Pro. It wouldn't be a bad idea to save it in the same folder as all of your media, though. The save file isn't that critical where you put it. It's all personal preference, as I said. So I'm going to leave it there. The rest of this stuff may change based on what computer you have. You're probably going to want to go ahead and leave all of this stuff as its defaults. So we're going to go ahead and click on OK now, and it will pop into the empty project. Alright, so now that everything has transferred from our SD card onto our hard drive, we'll go ahead and take all of these video files and we can simply drag them into this thing that says Import Media to Start. And it's going to take it a minute to import the files, and we can start editing these things. So the first thing it does is it imports all the files, and then it's also going to be worth waiting for it to finish doing whatever it says it's going to do down here. Now, technically speaking, the software will let you start editing before all of this gets done, but it's worth it just to go ahead and let it go through and figure out what it needs for all of these files. Otherwise, it's just going to be kind of a pain in the butt to edit stuff, and it's not going to work quite right for you. So it's best to just go ahead and let it finish, and then we'll start editing. So while this is doing its thing, let me go ahead and point out a couple of things on the user interface here. So first off, along the top, we have several different modes, if you will. These basically just arrange the different windows. So the main ones that I'm going to be using today are editing and effects. And you can kind of see what happens if you click on one of these. It just moves these windows around so you have some different things at your disposal to use. We're going to start off in the editing tab because that's the one that's the most useful for just cutting the videos together. And then what we have here in the editing tab, this can be changed into a few different things. There's like effects, controls, and everything else. But for now, we're going to leave this set on the source one. That's the default, and I'll show you what that does in a second. This window over here is where the preview for your timeline is. And then this down here, of course, is the timeline. So we're going to go ahead and start editing. Now with this video, the last clip here is actually going to go first because I had to refilm the intro because the first time I filmed it, it was out of focus. But anyway, what you can do is from here, you can double click on these files and they will open up in this window in the corner. This is mostly useful to figure out what files you have and to find the files that you need to put them into the timeline in the correct order. I'll show you another trick that you can do with this. So we find the start of where I start talking in this video. All right, so today we're gonna be performing. What we can do, we can click on this button that says Mark In, or you can hit the I key on the keyboard, and then you can come to the end of the video clip, wherever that may be. You can also play and pause these videos by clicking on the space bar. But anyway, at the end of the video clip, we can click on this button which says Mark Out, or you can press the O key on the keyboard. And what that's gonna do is when we take this video and put it into the timeline, it will only show this section of the video here that's in gray, and we don't have to worry about all this junk in the front that we don't actually want in the video. So that's the next thing to do. We can go ahead and do exactly what this says. It says drop media here, so we can take this video, click on it, drag and drop it over to here, and that's going to go into the timeline. And then this window over here is the timeline preview. The first thing that I like to do when I drag a video over here is click on this wrench and say expand all tracks. And that's just going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on. Just makes it a bit easier to work with. Another thing worth noting is this little toggle over here where it says full right now. You can click on this, and I'm gonna set this to half, but essentially what that is, it's the playback resolution. And if you're having issues where your playback is stuttering a lot and it's lagging, you can take that and you can set it down lower. And by setting this at a lower fraction, it'll make it easier for your computer to run, because it won't have to process all of the pixels. Instead, it's only going to process half or a quarter of the pixels. So anyway, on to actually editing this. Now I can guarantee you that I messed up this intro a couple of times, and you'll notice that there's some gaps in the audio. Now, one of the things that I do a lot with my videos is I will start talking and I will mess up, and then I'll just pause for a second and then I'll start over. And you can see it in things like this where there's a big gap in the audio. So the audio actually becomes a very important part of the editing process. Now, in order to trim a clip from here, so I can almost guarantee that this, without even watching this part of the video, I can guarantee you that it really starts here. Now, I just showed you how to set these in and out points. It's not that critical that you get those correct, and honestly, it's not even that critical that you do it at all, because you can do all that work down in the timeline as well. So if I get close to the edge of the video, that little symbol is going to pop up, and then it's the same sort of thing but in the other direction on the other side of the video. And that is the trim tool. So I can come in here and I can trim the video off like so. And then that creates a bit of an issue because now we have this big gap right here where it's just black. The easiest way to solve that issue is to right click and then go ripple delete, which is the only option that pops up, but that will just shift everything over and get rid of that black space. And this will work the same way as our preview in the other window where we can click on the space bar, and that will start to play and pause the video for us. So now I'm going to show you how to cut out a piece in the middle of the video. In order to do this, you're going to select the razor tool, and we're going to click on the start of the piece that we want to cut out, and we're going to play the video until the end of the piece that we want to cut out. Now, today I want to, it's probably going to be over here somewhere. So today I want to do, all right, so I'm going to cut that out until right here. And one thing you do want to be careful about is not leaving this razor tool selected. You're going to want to go back to the normal selection tool, because if you don't, you're going to probably end up accidentally cutting your video in a bunch of places and it just turns into a big mess. So anyway, what we can do is we can now select that piece of video that we just cut with the razor tool, and we can click on the delete key. That'll get rid of it. And then we're going to go back to right clicking on the empty spot here, ripple delete, and that will shrink in everything again. Now, there are shortcuts for all these things. We can cut the video without ever selecting the razor tool, and we can do that by hitting Control K on the keyboard, and that's going to cut the video without ever having to select the tool. And now we're going to hit Control K again, because this part is what we want to cut out. Hit delete, and we'll go ripple delete again, and that gets rid of it. And I'm going to cut out this little piece in here as well, so Control K, we'll move this over, Control K, delete, right click, ripple delete. Alright, so I've finished cutting up the rest of this video, and we'll go ahead and move on to our next one. And you'll see every once in a while Adobe Premiere will just pop up with that little saving message. That is an autosave. Now, in that class that I took in high school, another thing that got drilled into my head with all Adobe software is to save a lot, because it is quite buggy and it likes to crash. So of course, Control S is the shortcut to save a project, and as you can see, it only takes a couple of seconds. It's definitely worth doing that every once in a while and not having to start over if something goes horribly wrong. But anyway, moving right along here, the next video clip that I'm going to need is this guy, and again, it's just a drag and drop procedure. Another useful thing that you can do here in manipulating the timeline, of course you have the scroll bar on the bottom so you can move the timeline back and forth, but you'll notice that you also have these two little dots on the side of the scroll bar, and what you can do with that is you can zoom in and out of your timeline so you can show more or less of it at once. And zooming in will allow you to make fine little adjustments. Zooming out gives you a more broad view of what's going on. And you can also zoom in and out using the plus and minus keys on your keyboard. And one other helpful trick is if you want to show the entire timeline, you can click on, I believe it's the backslash key, which is the one right above the enter key, and it just shows the entire timeline fit perfectly in the window. All right, another useful tip for trimming these videos. If you go to the point where you can see this little guy here, that little red symbol, and you hold down the control key, it turns yellow. And when it's in this mode where it's yellow, you can click on it and drag over to wherever you want to cut it, let go, and it automatically does the ripple delete part for you, so you don't have to manually go back in and delete that space where it just inserts black. And another thing is, you notice I like to use the this thing here. It's called the current time indicator, or CTI, as sort of a marker for that kind of stuff. So when I do that, you'll notice that when I drag this over, it kind of snaps to the CTI, and that's probably the easiest way to make precise cuts in anything, is just to use that, because all the tools will want to snap to that thing. So I'll just continue playing this video and cutting out the spots that I don't necessarily want. All right, so with this video clip, I want to do a bit of a trick with it, and what I want to do is play all of the video, but not necessarily all of the audio. And the reason for this is because some of the audio needs to be cut out for various reasons, mostly because I make mistakes in it. But anyway, in order to do this, first thing we're going to have to do is right click on our video clip and go to unlink. What that's going to allow us to do is edit the video and the audio separately. So with this video clip, essentially what I'm showing is just this little thing heating up, and I want that to be continuous with no cuts in it. So I'm going to let all of that video play, and we're just going to take some of the audio out. So now that we have the audio and the video separated, what we can do is just select the audio, and if we hit Control K now to cut the clip, it's only going to cut the audio and not the video. And one thing that you will have to be careful of is if you don't have any clips selected, or in this case I have the clip over here selected but not any of them where the CTI is, if I hit Control K now, it will cut through both of them, and we don't want that. So I'm going to select the audio again, we'll hit Control K, and I'm just going to delete the audio. And we're going to come back and fix this gap later. So right now I've made basically these three different audio clips that all need to be attached together to make sensible sentences. So we're just going to go ahead and do that. So now with everything moved over, we haven't affected the video at all, but we've changed the audio to make it a lot more sensible. Also, another very useful tool that you probably already know if you've messed with any kind of software like this before, but Control Z is your undo. So that's a very good one to know. Alright, so another useful tool is if we right click on this and go into speed and duration, we can speed up or slow down a video clip, and essentially it's relatively self-explanatory, but so you want to speed this clip up 4 times, we're going to set the speed to 400%, and you'll see our duration went from 40 seconds down to about 10 seconds. We can also do this in the other way. If you wanted a clip to last a specific amount of time, you could click on this and you could say, make the clip last for 20 seconds, and it'll automatically figure out what the speed percentage should be. But I want to go ahead and run it at 400%. You can also use this tool to reverse a video clip. You can play it in reverse at whatever speed you want. And of course, if you wanted to slow down a video, instead of putting in a number higher than 100%, you would put in a number lower than 100%. Another thing that you can do is maintain the audio pitch, which I'm not going to do, but it basically keeps you from sounding like a squeaking mouse, and you can kind of understand the words still. And this last button is the ripple edit thing, and what that's going to do, actually the easiest way is just going to be to show you. If I click on OK right now, it's just going to speed up this video clip by a lot, and it's going to leave this big gap here. And if I undo that by hitting Control Z, I go back in here and I re-enable that, set it to 400% again. We click on OK. Now it's going to shift all the clips over with it, which is a very useful feature. And now, of course, if I play this, it's going to go a lot faster. And you can also hear that the audio has gotten a lot faster. So just because of how annoying the audio is here, I'm going to show you another thing that you can do. And you'll notice that there's this white line going through all of the audio clips. And what this is a bit of a gain adjustment. So if you move the line up, it will make the sound louder, and if you move the line down, it will make the sound quieter. And what you can do is you can move it all the way down or most of the way down. I think I'm just going to put it, say around here and see what it sounds like. So there's still audio there, but it's not as loud and it's not as annoying. Or if you had quiet audio, of course, you could do the opposite thing. You can set it up here, and that's going to make it significantly louder. But anyway, we're going to set this down here somewhere. I'm going to show you one more thing while we're here doing this, and that is the type tool. So we can click on that, and we're just going to click on this window up here wherever we want our text to appear. So I'm going to put it right there. Then we can type whatever we want. I'm going to put 4x speed down here. Now before I mentioned the effects tab, and we're going to go ahead and go into the effects tab right now, because this is where you would normally do any kind of effects controls, which is what we want to do. And right now, just ignore most of this stuff. The only thing that I care about is this right here where it says text. And we're going to go ahead and change some stuff with this. So we can change our font, and I'm going to change it to Impact, because that's usually what I use for my videos. You can choose whatever font you want, of course. And we can change the size of it with this slider here. We can also do things like adding a stroke to the outside of it. So we're just going to make a black stroke, and I'm going to put probably about that much, doesn't really matter. And the way that I'm adjusting that is just by clicking and dragging my mouse over. You can also click on it once and type in a number if you wish. Doesn't really matter how you do it. And you have your sort of standard controls. You can center the text, or you can left or right justify the text, which doesn't really make any difference for me because it's only one line. And you can do some other things. You can change the fill color, change the stroke color, which I already did. And you can change things like the opacity of the text and the position and whatnot, which we're not going to worry about that too much, but we're going to put that right there, and we are going to leave it. And you'll notice that it's added another video clip onto the next track up here. And this is the text layer, essentially. And what we can do is we can just take our trim tools and we can actually make this longer. So we can make it the entire duration of that clip that's sped up. So now if we play this through, the spot where it goes into 4x speed, is going to have a little label that says 4x speed on it. Another little trick that we can do is we can take this text that we already created. If we go ahead and hit Control C to copy that text, we can also paste the text, but it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to do this, because for whatever reason, if I paste it in right now, it's going to stick it in this main timeline, and it's going to replace the video with the text, which is kind of annoying. So what you have to do is go to the end, hit Control V, and then go back and move it up to the upper layer here on the video 2 track. And once that's done, we can come in here and we can just trim that guy down, and then we have the exact same 4x speed label as we do over here. And we can also mute the audio on this because we really don't need it, because it's just kind of annoying. Another thing that you can do is if you want to select multiple clips at once, you can click on an empty spot in the timeline and just drag over them. And I'm going to go ahead and delete these two because they're pretty pointless to have in the video. All right, so here's another useful thing that you can do. Let's say that you want to zoom in to a point on your clip here. What we can do is go over into the effects tab, and then in this part where it says scale, we can go ahead and click on that, and we can drag it over, and we can zoom in essentially on a single part of the frame there. And if you need to move the video around, we can use these two things that say position, and we can move it left and right and up and down. Alright, so I've pretty much completed editing the video. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and take a second to save it, because of course we don't want something going horribly wrong now. And the last thing I'm going to do is go into the effects tab up here, and we're going to go down to video transitions, and we're going to add in some transitions to this thing. I kind of have a style that I do with my transitions. You can do essentially whatever you want. My two favorites are cross dissolve and dip to black. I also tend to use these like cube spin ones and the crazy ones every once in a while. You don't want to get too carried away with the transitions, because they do become annoying after a certain amount of time. But anyway, usually what I'll do is I'll put one of the more crazy ones in between, say a scene like this where I'm talking, and then going to the next scene, I'll put in something like the cube spin, so we have everything animation going into the next scene. Now, one thing you may have noticed is that there's this yellow line running across my entire video. And now where I've put that transition in, there is a red line. And what that red line is it's an unrendered piece of the video. And you can render the previews by hitting the Enter key, and you'll get this little thing pop up, and it will go through, it'll render, and it'll start playing it from the beginning. But anyway, you'll see that has now turned green, which means that we've rendered it. You don't necessarily have to render previews like that ever. If your computer can play it fine with the red bars on it, it doesn't really matter. The yellow bar is a part that it won't render by default. There is a way to force it to render that yellow part, which you can do by going into sequence, and then you can render into out. That will render the entire thing. And that's only really useful or necessary if you're having problems getting it to play back smoothly. As you've seen already, this video is playing just fine, so there's no need for me to do that. There wasn't really even a need to fix that red part. I just figured I'd go ahead and show you how that's done. And then between a scene like this, I might throw in the cross dissolve transition. Alright, and then the thing that I use the dip to black transition for is to show the passage of time. Again, this isn't necessarily anything that you have to do, it's just what I do. So the dip to black transition I would use here because it took some time for this block of metal to cool off, so I could do the next part of the video.
That's not great. Alright, so now the
and I'll just continue to put in transitions every once in a while. I'm not going to put transitions in every single little jump cut like this.
Screw it.
Alright. Because sometimes actually there it might be worth putting the transitions. Sometimes the transitions are more jarring than the jump cuts. Sometimes the jump cuts are more jarring than the transitions. Alright then, I'm going to go ahead and call that good with the transitions. Now there is one more thing that I need to fix with this video, and that is all the gaps that I put in the audio where I tried to edit out some stuff. So I'm going to start trying to fix that here. I'm going to go ahead and cut out this section. Now, spots that I ran this at 400% speed, I already mentioned I'm not putting the audio in where I have things running in the sort of time-lapse mode. So these longer gaps, I can go ahead and just speed them up, and it'll blend in with the rest of it. So we have 4x speed here. That's not a bad thing to do, especially since it makes the video go faster. It makes for a shorter video, and that'll be a little bit nicer. The other thing that I can do is, right now it might be a little bit weird to play this.
250 degrees from the nozzle.
Because it goes into complete silence.
Looks like my thermocouple may have lost.
Complete silence isn't necessarily a great thing for this, because normally the background noise sounds like this, which is basically sounds like the fan on my 3D printer running. But what we can do is we can cut out this section, and we're going to copy that, so we're just going to hit Control-C. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, and I'm just going to take a few of these. We're going to paste in a couple of them, and I'm going to drag them into this lower audio channel, this audio 2 track. And what we can do with these guys is just take them, line them up with our gaps here, and we can simply trim this guy down and pop it into the gap. 50 degrees from the nozzle. Looks like my thermocouple may have lost. And then that way there we don't have any terrible audio gaps, and we just continue to have the normal background noise.
Black.
So at this point in this video, I am pretty much done with it, and what I would do is go ahead and watch through everything and make sure it looks good, but the next step is to export it. So before I go to attempt to export this, we're going to save it, because I can't tell you how many times I've tried to export a video and then Premiere just crashes. So in order to export a video, you can go into File and then Export, and we want to export media. And you can also use the shortcut Control-M to get to this, but we'll go ahead and click on that. So what I usually use is just this match source high bitrate thing. You could also do for example, the YouTube 4K or 1080p presets. Those will work well for this as well. But anyway, I'm going to do match source high bitrate. I'm going to click on this part where it says output name, and I'm going to give it a name, and you can also change what folder it's going to save to, which I already have it saved where I want it. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and give it a name. And then down in the settings, we're not going to change a whole lot because it's automatically detecting what the video is, and it's keeping most of that the same. So this is a 4K video at 30 frames a second. So we have 3840 by 2160, 29.97 frames a second. Generally speaking, you're going to want to use hardware encoding if you can, because that's going to make it go faster. And the last thing is the target bit rate. Now it says match source high bit rate. It's really not that high. 10 megabits per second is not a very high bit rate. And if you know what your camera shoots at, I would recommend using that number. What I would probably recommend is for 4K videos, you would do 50 megabits per second. For 1080p videos, you do about 30. For 720p videos, you'd probably get away with 15-ish. Anyway, that should work just fine without any noticeable quality drop. And the last thing to do is just click on the export button. And exporting videos in Adobe Premiere is a pretty slow process, but I'll go ahead and let this finish, and we'll come back and wrap this video up. Alright, so I realized I didn't actually ever film an outro for this video, so I'm going to do that right now. And first off, I want to apologize that my audio setup was not very good for this video. The desktop audio in OBS was turned down, but it was not turned down anywhere near far enough, so the audio from Adobe Premiere was kind of overpowering, so I had to cut out a lot of sections of video that weren't too important due to that. But anyway, of course, once that export is done, you can find the video file in wherever you told it to save earlier when we were setting up the export. And anyway, that video shows you the process that I go through to edit my videos, and should give you at least some idea as to what you can do with Adobe Premiere with some of the more basic tools. And hopefully you guys learned something. If you did, go ahead and click on that like button. If you have any other questions, you can leave those down in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them, and I'll see you in the next video.